To retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General and author of the bestseller War Without Rules, Rob Spalding. General, always good to have you. This is a crucial meeting at a crucial time. The president's going to be getting extra scrutiny, should he?
Well, I mean, let's not talk about his debate performance, but, it really should be focused on our relationship with NATO and what are we trying to achieve? We add all of this aid that's going to Ukraine, but there's no consequences if they don't, get a ceasefire or anything. And then furthermore, being in the first digital Cold War, NATO needs to evolve to meet the information age threats that we have. It's not just about terror. It's about the programming of our citizens through applications like TikTok.
So when the president tells George Stephanopoulos, and he was saying this again in a speech in Wisconsin, that I brought NATO back, I'm paraphrasing here, General, the gist is it's in a lot better shape and we're a lot more united than we were when the other guy was in power. What do you think of that?
Honestly, there's been really no significant change in NATO's posture, in my opinion. I mean, that hasn't been caused, of course, by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's been a galvanizing event. But ultimately, like I said, NATO needs to evolve. It needs to understand that we're fighting not just, in Ukraine, we're fighting for the very survival of the Western civilization, our principles, our values. That's something that Biden needs to lead on, and so far he hasn't.
The debate has spurred all sorts of questions about, the mental competency of the president, especially in these heightened, tense times. An issue I brought up with Tom Tillis, the senator, who had his concerns when it came to international security. I want you to respond to this, General.
I say if I were making my decision purely in a political vacuum, then I would say let Biden stick around through November and January. He will be beaten by Donald Trump. I'm talking about whether or not you're comfortable having what we saw on the debate stage in the cockpit of a nation of 330 million people. This is a dangerous world. There is any number of instances that we could be threatened because of the perceived weakness of our commander-in-chief.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think the commander-in-chief has to have a set of convictions. You go back to Reagan. Reagan really didn't like communism and is willing to stand up to the Soviet Union. I think Eisenhower had his convictions. So did Lincoln. The president is a very important position within our government, and all power of the executive branch is within that single person. And so the Secretary of State doesn't make foreign policy. Secretary of Defense doesn't make security policy. The president does. And so he has to be mindful and convicted, and he has to have the presence of mind to understand these complex relationships that are currently driving the first digital Cold War.
General, in remarks the president has made since the debate, he had to explain himself at cold. He was battling all of this. But we also learned a little bit about how he sort of maps out his day, that normally it's kind of done by 4. He's very, tired by 8 o'clock at night. I'm thinking our enemies, if you're Iran, if you're Russia, if you're China, and you hear that 8 o'clock, he's at it. It's probably too strong on my part to characterize it that way. Wouldn't that embolden them?
Well, definitely. And I think and that just goes without saying. I think, as I think, to my future, if I'm at that age, what are the things that I want to be doing? It's noble that he wants to serve the country, but is he serving it in the best way? That would be the question I would be asking myself.
Meanwhile, these terror threats, they seem to occur no matter the environment, but the environment is particularly dicey right now. And they were particularly targeted at U.S. bases, I believe, in Europe, General. I don't know much more than that, but they're real enough to have heightened security to levels we haven't seen in a couple of years. What do you make of it?
Well, what's sad is that, Europe has had a bunch of southern border excursions. Now we have the same problem going on. So whatever is going on in Europe, I would equally be concerned about what's going on here in the United States. And I think we have to be very concerned because there's been so many people coming across the southern border. But when you have people that don't actually agree with the principles and values of your society, and there isn't a plan to integrate them, then you're gonna be exposed to these threats. And it's just part of the way we've evolved. And I'm not sure why we did it. The history books are going to have to, determine what the end result was to the United States. But as I'm sitting here, I'm really kind of afraid of the implications for our own national security, never mind our bases in Europe.
General, very good. Even a little scary catching up with you, but I'm glad we did. Rob Spalding, the retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.